So the next thing that I saw that was bothersome, I don't even know. I know I had some people on Twitter comment on it or whatever. They thought it was a good idea. Blue Lives Matter. So Louisiana last week signed into law. A law was signed into law by a bill was signed into law by their Democratic governor. Blue Lives Matter. What do you mean Blue Lives Matter? Well, I'm pretty sure you've heard, Blue Lives Matter, kind of like in a response to Black Lives Matter protests and incidences. People would talk about how police lives matter too. There's never been a question that police lives matter, right? This law was supposedly enacted after I think a sheriff's deputy or a state trooper, I can't remember which one, was murdered in Texas. And allegedly the person targeted him because he was law enforcement. And that is really unfortunate. And let's be clear, right? To talk about this law in of itself does not mean that anyone does not value life. Because that's what all this is about valuing life. And when people are pushing with Black Lives Matter and pushing for police accountability, and actually holding police accountable, actually discussing the conversation around the extreme leeway that is given police officers, and not just these police killings, but in police brutality cases, police abuse, misuse cases across the board. There was actually a law, they were trying to pass a law in California that would have unsealed police misconduct records, right? In an attempt to break through the blue code of silence, and it fell short of some votes, so it did not pass. And I just saw that in Northern California ACLU had a piece about that, and that is a thing. Like police officers, and it's understandable. Police officers have a job to do, and of course, especially if you're dealing with criminals and issues like that, or suspected individuals, right? To some extent, you may understand why people need leeway to do some of the things they do, but at the same time, something's got to give, because there are some really egregious cases, and we only hear about a fraction of them. Like, if we were to hear about every single case, every shakedown, every abusive incident, not just the police killings, and we don't even hear about all of those. We were to hear about everything, property destruction, all types of stuff that happens, right? There's a pastor out of Chicago. She was accosted by two police, dragged out the car by her neck, and beaten in front of her kids because she didn't move her car out the way fast enough for them in an alleyway when she was trying to turn into her house. And they came flying down. This happened, I think, 2 years ago. The case is just now coming up. They came flying down the alleyway without their sirens on or anything. I've actually had something similar, not the abuse part, but I've had police flying out of nowhere, no sirens, no lights, nothing. So there is an issue with accountability. There is an issue with the standard. What's reasonable behavior for an officer is based on what is reasonable for an officer. The problem is when you're being socialized and engaged in a system of unreasonableness, when the standards in place allow you to discriminate, allow you to think that you're above the law, how are we going to use that as a standard when the standard itself is broken? So this is a very fair conversation to have. However, there's been met with a lot of backlash because Blue Lives Matter. No one denies, I'm not denying that a cop's life matter. Life is precious and valuable. I don't have to like you to agree that your life matters. And I'm not saying that I don't like police because they're police. I'm just saying that it's ridiculous to kind of equate the two. We have an issue where there are a class of crimes that are committed, and rarely ever is the person held accountable, but for the fact of what they do. So the converse should not be now those people need even more protection. So the Louisiana law, what it does, it expands hate crime protection in the state hate crime, statute. So Louisiana's statute, I think I had it. I had it up earlier, but anyway, hate crime statutes were used for issues where people were targeted based on like race, gender, religion, ethnicity. There are certain specific enumerated classes, right? And whether or not a killing rises to the level and falls within a hate crime. So what this does is it adds first responders like firefighters, para EMTs, and police officers to the list of protected classes for hate crime status. So, well, what's wrong with that, Anoa? We should want police to stay safe. Yes, we should. However, this law serves really no purpose except for to make police primarily and really the issues police to make them untouchable, right? This elevates them to a special class that can do no wrong. Because basically, what would you consider a hate crime? Because supposedly anything will be targeting them because they're a police officer now. Because the other thing on the issue, well, because I had someone respond to me on Twitter, well, no, we need to be holding people accountable for killing police. When have you ever heard of anyone who has not been punished for killing a police officer? Cop killers get the swiftest justice ever. I mean, some people will say it's not justice. I agree. We have people who are wrongfully accused and convicted of killing cops, and they are sitting there on death row or elsewhere. Swift, inaccurate issues, right? We have a lot of issues in the justice system. But with this, Louisiana actually is one of the places where you can get the death penalty for killing a cop. So you already can get the death penalty for killing a cop in Louisiana. Louisiana has very stiff rules involved. There are like several states. I forget how many it is, but several states in the country have enhanced sentences. There's already increased protection under the law. Like it's already taken very seriously. So why elevate police protected class, right? Like it sets up a problem. It sets up a dynamic when we're talking about effectively addressing issues involving police accountability. Because, we have a situation where now this person is elevated and any crime can now be considered, or anything that happens can now be considered you doing something because they're in that position. Here's the other thing that's different from, everything else is a mutable characteristic. I can't change my skin color. Even if you do change your gender, that in and of itself, in some places, is somewhere to still attack you because of that fact, right? That would rise to the level of hate crime. There are things that rise to the level of hate crime, but if you were to quit being a cop tomorrow, right? Like the issue, you could just do a different job. Like where does it end with adding people to hate crimes? We just keep adding people to the hate crime registry just because willy-nilly. What does that do for those groups that it was meant to actually protect and discourage from being attacked? Like there's also this misnomer. There's this misnomer that police are just like, it's all out war on police, because that's what this is a response to, is right. This tragic, woe is us, everybody's out to get us mentality, which doesn't even match up with the numbers. Police killings have actually been on the decline, based on federal statistics available. It's funny, we can get statistics on police killings, like as in killings of police officers. We cannot get statistics of people killed by the police. It's rather disconcerting. But the number of police killed, like by gunfire, for example, is actually on decline. And it's not like it's this huge, overwhelming amount either. So to have a law that creates a special category, hate crime category for police officers, or elevates them to the protected class status, it's actually. And some of the response too is that, if there were certain other measures, right? Because here's the thing. If there was a legitimate concern, there are so many other things you can do. You can address issues with your mental health system, right? Because in a lot of these cases, you have people, it's already so few cases, but of those cases, you're also dealing with, in a lot of times, people who have, some type of mental illness or other disturbance, right? So instead of actually addressing root causes of this alleged issue, we're just painting over something, to make it look pretty when it's really crap underneath. So the like I said, death penalty is already on the table if you've killed an officer in the line of duty, right? You know, there is there is, you could properly fund mental health, which it's not even like Louisiana has tried these other things, right? You can work on police training budgets, right, and work on de-escalation. There's all types of stuff that could happen. And or if legislators would actually even address issues, again, going back to police training, but addressing the issues that give rise to some of these protests stuff regarding, you know, police engagement, use of force, etc. Right? Like there's so much that goes into this that is not even being addressed or dealt with. And here we are with this whole notion that, well, we're just going to pass. And again, the law actually does, and this is not the first, this is the first law that makes it a hate crime, but this is not the first. It's been legally, in many states, there are increased penalties for attacking someone who's law enforcement or someone who is emergency service personnel, firefighter, EMT. So, oh yeah, I found it. Here it goes. House Bill 953 expands Louisiana's existing list of groups protected against hate crimes on grounds of race, age, gender, religion, color, creed, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry. In addition, it adds law enforcement officers, firefighters, emergency paramedics, and it provides for an increased penalty of 5 years in prison and up to $5,000 fine for anyone who commits a felony hate crime against any of those listed individuals. And so the message is that hate crimes will not be tolerated. But, like, you know, what is considered a hate crime and what's going to be considered a hate crime when we're talking about police officers? Like, again, the terms of the Texas cop who unfortunately was murdered by someone, that's like an extreme example that rarely happens. And when we start legislating to the extremes, instead of actually looking and taking stock about what's going on. Like, we have stagnant issues in our state houses across the country, but yet we find these legislatures, and in this case, we have a Democratic governor, we find people who are more than willing to legislate to the extremes to appease sensibilities of certain interests versus actually addressing ongoing issues of concerns that would uplift community, you know, spirit, momentum, improvement, development, that would actually make a difference in how things are done and improve life overall. So the New Orleans chapter of the Black Youth Project said that this legislation is a part of a malicious trend designed to squander the gains of civil rights movement by police officers scrambling to avoid criticism from their constituents. And that's a really interesting point, because who wants to be targeted and accused of committing a hate crime against a cop? Because exactly what is it you're targeting? Because it's just targeting someone because of what they do. So what is that? What will that look like? What will we see people being charged with exactly? And how is that going to come into play? You know, they said last year's tally was the lowest in 12 years. So official statistics show that fatal shootings of police officers have decreased steadily from a peak of about 127 annually, 127 police officers annually in 1970s to 41. 41 police officers were killed last year in 2015, 41 nationwide. And that prompted this law. Versus over 1,000, over 1,000 unarmed people killed by police last year, nothing. Just nothing. Yeah, and Pennsylvania has a similar law. Like, it's not considered, a lot of states have similar laws that would add aggravated circumstances, increase sentencing penalties. And that's what makes something like this really glaring, and more than just trying to protect the police officer, because there's actually a lot of measures in place already to protect or to actually get justice if a police officer is attacked or harmed or killed or something like that. So that's kind of my take on the Blue Lives Matter law. I think it's a piece of work. Donnie Martin from the chat room. Thank you guys for interacting and stuff. That's pretty cool. It definitely helps. Does this law provide an enhancement to the charge of assaulting a cop if the motivation is because they're a cop? It's a hate crime. So if there's an enhancement provided, if the crime is targeted toward the person because they are doing that, it provides an enhancement. But here's the thing, like I said, if you attack a cop, if you kill a cop, many states already have some enhancement. Cases involving cops, like when you see Law and Order just had an episode last week, right, where a cop got like that's real, like, because it's one of our own, it's someone from the system. They take it very seriously, right? When cops are attacked, it's taken very seriously. So regardless of whether the person specifically did it on hate or not, it doesn't even matter. Right? It doesn't matter, because with these sentence enhancements that already exist, with the way, the way attacks on police, killings, whatever they are already treated, they're already treated more seriously, regardless of what the intention was. Whether it was an accident, it doesn't matter. They're already treated more seriously. Making it elevating it to the level of a hate crime is unnecessary. Because hate crimes exist to protect certain classes of people, right? And people who are targeted, who are usually marginalized and underrepresented and targeted, race, class, not race, not class, race, ethnicity, gender, national origin, sexual orientation, right? Think about Matthew Shepard, right? The young man who was beaten, the young gay man who was beaten, the teenager who was beaten. The hate crimes exist for a reason, to now allow police officers, when there's not even any indication that there's some issue with police officers being attacked, threatened because they're police officers, right? Like, 41 cops were killed last year. There's no indication that there's a need for such a law. And to actually legislate in this manner versus legislating to deal with all the other underlying issues that could lead to situations where these things occur, it sends a different message than we're really serious about dealing with issues with the community. We just want to flex our muscles and let you know that we're important and you're not, right? Because if we're really looking at, we should be looking at how to charge cops who act outside the law instead of protecting them in the blue shroud of silence. That is something that should be looked at, because, we look at the police killings, people are like, 1,000 people killed, but that's a lot. That's a lot more than it should be. And then you also have all the numbers of cases of actual police misconduct outside of police killings too, destruction of property, police brutality in terms of excessive use of force, just all types of stuff that never get addressed at all. And it's just supposed to be like, oops, you're bad. You shouldn't have a run-in with the police at all. Like, that's a problem, and it's not balanced. So the motivation is irrelevant. Because they're already enhancements already exist. Like, again, what do you need to charge someone with a hate crime for? If someone were to kill a cop because they were a cop in Louisiana, they're already eligible for the death penalty. What is throwing a hate crime on there going to do, except send the message? Like, what message does it send? Because you're already going to get the death penalty for killing a cop. Like, what is the purpose? Like, if we're going to legislate, again, people are legislating to the extremes. Same thing with the bathroom bill, with those transgender bathroom bill issues. They're legislating to the extremes. They're legislating for examples in situations that are more than likely not going to happen. And instead of putting real brain power into legislating issues that actually can better people's lives, communities, like, they're so concerned about supposedly male sexual predators pretending to be women and going to women's bathrooms. There are male sexual predators going in men's bathrooms and attacking little boys. Where's the concern? You see what I'm saying? Like, I understand how people can get caught up in the logicalness of, like, well, I mean, that kind of makes sense that you want to make sure people aren't targeted because of who they are. But on the flip side, we have police officers who do just that. They target people because of who they are, and they get away with it because they're police officers. And now they're getting protected, and as if somehow they need an extra level of protection. Like, that's not what hate crimes were meant to do. And now we're expanding the definition of who a hate crime protects. And the concern by people like not the ACLU, the Anti-Defamation League, the concern is that by expanding the hate crime definition in this way, it sets a bad precedent and actually erodes the strength and meaning of hate crime legislation. So Marcus Plenty said, according to mappingpoliceviolence.org, police officers get away without being convicted 98% of the time. Yes, and more children die in America than police. Yes, yes. Blue Bloods is a good example. Like, seriously, it's all, like, that's not just TV. Like, that's the thing about that's not just TV. I've been watching Law and Order since I was a little kid. And my dream has always been to be a writer for Law and Order. And then original Law and Order went off. And I don't have the depraved mind to write for Law and Order SVU. But yes, just looked it up. Christopher, you ain't trust me? Yes. I read this. I looked at it. I was prepared. Like I think it's New York and Michigan have sentence enhancements for it. Like it is already an increase. So when you do see whether it's Blue Bloods, I think Q was saying that there's a great example of Blue Bloods as a multi-story arc about cops getting killed. Like, and it's not that, again, this is purely looking at the legislative intent, the law itself. People should be held responsible for the things that they do. And that is across the board. That's not just individuals. Law enforcement needs to be held accountable. They don't need to be further protected and enshrined as a special class under law, because they're not. I mean, they're people who make choices and decisions across the board like the rest of us. So that was, yeah. I mean, just reading it, I couldn't believe my eyes. And then, like, it's like I said, it's a Democrat. I mean, he's a Dixiecrat for real. We've talked about Dixiecrats and stuff like that. I mean, he's a Dixiecrat. He's a conservative Democrat, the governor in Louisiana. And I mean, it's just remarkable because, again, based on, there were 41 cops killed last year and 1 cop was killed in Texas. And that prompted this law, and it got passed through without objection. Because, people do things and go along with stuff because they want to be patriotic and they want to do what's the right thing. But we really need to start asking questions. And moving forward.